but I think you are such a hard worker, and then you
Oh, thank
make
you.
these all of the content you make. Like you have to be literally in front of a screen all day, every day.
Yeah, I spent,
You
it's
needed a
like,
break.
it's a very harsh reality to realize that you're spending more time in front of screens than you are just like, I don't know, touching grass. Like I just needed days off where I was like going outside and going for walks. I'm actually upset because I didn't get to take a walk today, and it's already dark outside.
Oh gosh.
What can you do though? But I'm
What
back.
can you
I'm
do?
excited.
Yeah.
I'm
Good.
living. I have an editor, and that gave me a new boost of energy because I'm like,
Thank
oh,
God.
oh shit. I'm like, let's like pump out more content. Let's go harder. So,
Yes.
I just filmed a video on Missy Beavers. I finally did one for YouTube, so I had to go back and relive that case all over again.
No.
The video I've never sent you because you've seen the footage from inside the church,
Mm-hmm.
which is creepy as hell. I had to review the footage from the actual sporting goods store with the car that came in, and like it's so weird, Sue. Like comes in, headlights on, then headlights off, parks in the dark, then puts the headlights on, then parks under a lamp. And the person who was analyzing, because it was like footage that was being analyzed, and there are sleuths who do a way better job than I do on YouTube with that case because this video was like 5 hours covering the case. And they did like frame by frame analyze this video of this car. There are several moments in that video where you can possibly see 2 people in the car. Yes. Which would explain why the driver's side seat was all the way back for a tall person, even though we know the person who did this to Missy was like 5'2" to 5'7".
I
Husband and
I
wife, maybe?
really think it's that husband and wife that you were talking about at the end of the episode.
Well, I thought so too, and then he brought that up. This person that God, I'm blanking on the name, but I'm gonna find it. He's a web sleuth and he does stuff like this, and he actually did a side by side comparison of the body type of the wife and the
Mm-hmm.
person caught on camera. The legs are too thin. There's no way it could be her.
Ugh.
The legs are. It's just like the body type. It's like big upper body, but then like short little legs. That's the thing that
Yeah.
runs in my family, like on the Polish side. It's like we
Yeah.
pack weight on the upper body and we have these like fit legs.
Yeah. Oh, same.
So that's what I've been doing. I've been locked into that. But how are you?
I'm doing well. I feel like it was a pretty stressful time there for God knows what reason, and then it feels like things have kind of leveled out a little bit.
Well, here I am to actually ruin all of that for you
Yeah,
and
I'm
tell you
like,
the
go
story
ahead
of
and send.
Dyatlov
I'm like, send
Pass.
me back down into a spiral, please.
Well, so this one isn't technically a true crime case that I'm going to cover. I'm going to change up the pace for you a little bit.
Okay. Oh,
Because, okay,
excited.
so if you remember last time, you had 2 requests. You were like, I want a case that's older
Hmm.
and maybe just something that's a little bit different. So, not necessarily like a true crime case or where we have kind of a definitive outcome with the victims. Although I suppose in this case we do. But I'm sure you've heard of it. And if you haven't, I will be blown away. Have you heard of Dyatlov Pass?
Say that again. It sounds like you said Diablo Pass.
Close enough. No, Dyatlov Pass.
Dyatlov Pass. Is that like an
Otherwise known
actual
as
passageway?
No. Surprisingly, I always thought it was too when I heard the case, but it's actually the last name of one of the victims in this case, Igor Dyatlov, which is Russian.
Oh, I was gonna say it sounds like some like Russian like highway or
It's
something, but
very Russian, darling.
yeah.
Very
Oh,
Russian.
I know. I have not heard of this.
Really? Maybe I find that shocking, and I think maybe as I explain the top line of it, you'll be like, "Oh, I know." It's also called Dead Mountain. You ever heard of Dead Mountain?
Dead Mountain. No.
So this took place in the Ural Mountains, I think that was called. Let me look at my research. Yeah, the Ural Mountains, which is known by the indigenous people who live in that area, the Mansi people, as Dead Mountain. Nothing? Okay.
Nothing, baby.
Yes. Oh, I'm so excited. This is
I'm
gonna
like
be.
my Russian knowledge is like Anastasia and Rasputin.
And that's all you
That's
need.
about as far as
That's
it
all you need.
goes.
This is incredible. Oh my. Okay, I'm so excited. This is. You have to understand. Like you saying this is to me like someone saying I've never heard of John Benet Ramsey.
Oh my
Like
god.
this case is wild, Stu, and it's we're gonna dabble a little bit outside of the realm of logical explanations. I would say some of the theories on this have to do with extraterrestrial? I've also realized while I was researching this that if you're like explaining a theory to somebody and you want them to take it seriously, I opt for the word extraterrestrial over aliens. I can't
I
take myself seriously.
well, I'm gonna debunk that for you because now all I can think of is the Katy Perry song. The
That's
second you
okay.
said that, it was like, it's so
I know you shot me
amazing.
right back to when did that song come out? Were we in high school? Were we in college?
I think it was college.
Really?
I always get
What?
that and Dark Horse mixed up.
It was like no, it was off the same album though. I'm pretty sure.
Okay, okay.
This is turning into
Um,
Katy Perry trivia.
yeah, oh my god.
That's unbelievable that we can shift from Dyatlov Dead Mountain from a case from the 1950s to Katy Perry's Dark Horse and E.T. featuring Kanye West.
California girls.
Oh, we are wild, dude. Okay. All right. So this is very exciting. I'm gonna dive in because I'm like like excited right now. I'm giddy that you don't know about this. Okay. Whew. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay, so this is the mystery of Dyatlov Pass. I'm going to set you up with a quick top line just to refresh your memory if you have heard it in the past. If not, that's even better. So, in 1959, a group of 10 highly experienced Soviet mountain climbers, including 2 women and 8 men, had ventured on a snow expedition in the Ural Mountains, which is otherwise known by the indigenous people as Dead Mountain, or this particular part of the mountain is. So one of them actually left the trip early due to some health issues and some joint pain, so the remaining 9 continued on the climb and eventually set up a tent to camp, which we believe was either on the night of February 1st or February 2nd. The timeline is a little murky. So after they never returned back from their climb, a rescue team was sent to go look for them, which found their campsite and eventually all 9 of the hikers dead. The campsite was found with the tent partially collapsed, having been cut from the inside out. Freaky, right?
Ooh.
2 of the bodies were found a mile from the campsite wearing nothing but their underwear. Then 3 more of the bodies were found at a different location near the tree line, one with a fractured skull. And the remaining 4 bodies were found about 2 months later. One of these 4 bodies that was found, had a severely fractured skull, and then 2 of the other bodies had clear signs of blunt force trauma, including crushed ribs, which was determined to be from a force stronger than what a human could do. And the woman in this group was found with a severe trauma and to be missing her tongue, eyes, and eyebrows. Yes. Oddly enough, this group of 4 was actually wearing all of the clothing of the bodies that had previously been found with their clothes. And even stranger than that, significant levels of radiation were found in the area of the campsite and on the clothing of 1 or 2 of the hikers. This case was like unbelievable at the time. It received international coverage, and the circumstances were just so unbelievably strange that even to this day, there is endless debate as to what really happened in those mountains on that February night, which is what is now called the Dyatlov Pass incident. First thoughts?
I'm thinking that there were like, yeah, I'm going into like 28 days later zombie
Mm-hmm.
territory with like radiation, cannibalism, like the whole like
Unnatural
that just
injuries.
sounds,
It's
yes.
wild. Oh my god. I mean, the circumstances of the setup of this is just menacing in and of itself. I don't really understand, and you can tell me how you feel about this, but I don't really understand the idea of people who choose to go camping or on expeditions or hiking through the snow, through the cold. I don't.
I
It's got to be a Russian thing.
It's got to be a Russian thing. I think it's also just you have to be a little bit out of your senses to want to do that and just know that you the potential to die is that,
Yeah,
you know,
it's like free. It's
it's
like
high.
free climbing, right? You know,
Free, yeah,
yeah, it's the same
same rush.
mentality.
Yeah.
And all of these students, they were actually students, the group of nine. They were all like pretty young, and they were actually very, very experienced climbers. We'll talk about this a little bit in the setup of what was leading up to the trip, but so much of this is shocking, I think, to people because these were class 2 climbers, and the highest you can reach is class 3 in Soviet Union at this time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when they were to come back from this trip, from this expedition, it would have been that would have been their certification for class 3. They would have reached the pinnacle. But yeah, there's something. The top line details of this are haunting.
Can you remind me what year this was?
This was 1959,
Oh my god.
the year I was born.
That's actually the year both of my parents were born.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, no way. My mom was 1960 and my dad was 56.
Oh.
I remember my mom got a book when she was, I think for like her 40th birthday or something. That was like the year she was born. That had all of these it had all of these things listed of like what things cost in the year she was born in the year 1960. Mm-hmm. I remember reading that and I was like, what the It was like a brand new home, only $12,000.
No, my gosh, don't even get me started.
It was like a full year of college, $500.
Oh my gosh. I guess my mom's book would have just been this story would have happened. Scary.
You should tell the story about a question about this incident.
Well, you know me, I have to go straight to the personal. So I'm like wondering what their relationships were to each other. Like, friends, was anybody dating? Like, are they just climbing friends? Like, I'm starting to go into the sinister of like, did one of them go nuts? Did they have to kill each other to survive? Like, I don't know.
I think there was actually a movie made about this that I think approached that narrative and that dynamic of like one of them went off or there was like a relationship, because that was one of the first things that people had noted with this case. I think everyone just tries to like look for the headline and try to like glean, I don't know, something that's inherently sexual out of it, because the thing about all of these bodies that were found is the majority of them were found without clothing. So people immediately said, well, was there a relationship going on? Was there, sex going on inside of the tent? And like jealous boyfriend, jealous girlfriend, something could have happened to that effect. But something that I'll get into with the details that we're going to cover for the days leading up and to the actual incident that I just want to talk about now, because I find this to me, this is the most definitive piece of evidence that makes this case what it is. So we know that the tent, they cut their way out of it, right? They cut their way out from the inside. The footprints that were found on the outside of the tent were not footprints of people who were running out of that tent. They were walking slowly. Isn't that weird as hell? Why would you cut your way out of a tent as if there's an emergency, as if you're trying to get out like frantically? And the way it was always described, they ran off into the darkness, but all of the footprints that were found were footprints scattered in different directions, but they were walking slowly. They were paced.
Like, it almost seems as if... Well, nobody was found in the tent?
Nobody was found in the tent. Yeah, the first two bodies... We'll go over it again, but the first two bodies were found way down on the tree line, just in their underwear. And then 3 more bodies were found on the way, as if they were trying to get back to the tent, but they were found about a mile away, in like positions as if they were like crawling to the tent. And 4 more bodies were found 2 months later, but they were down a ravine, like buried under several feet of snow. I'll cover all this in a second just to like refresh, but they were the ones who sustained the most like crippling injuries. Like they had like basically their bodies had been crushed. Very, very strange.
So strange. There was a part of me that was thinking, like, if I couldn't remember if one of the bodies was in the tent, like if one of them had, like done something to another member and was like cutting themselves out and just kind of walked away or something. But
some kind of evidence of like a struggle or something that would indicate like something went down in that tent, but there really wasn't anything. In fact, what was left in the tent actually just added to the confusion, because they had left without their clothing and without like, things on their body. But all of that was found in the tent. What are you drinking, by the way?
Actually, a mocktail. After last time, I was like, I gotta stay sober on this pod.
It's fine.
It's vitamin water with a little
Oh,
splash of lime.
I thought I saw a twist in there. Is there
A
a
little
citrus
twist.
twist?
A little citrus twist.
It
Lemon
looks like
lime.
it looked like a Negroni for a
I
second.
know.
I was
Doesn't it
like,
kind of look like a
damn.
Negroni? Yeah. No. I wish it was a Negroni.
It's like Happy Monday.
Yeah. Happy Monday, baby. Yeah. What? It really should be a. No, it's bad. That's bad.
What?
I was gonna say like a White Russian or something.
Stop. My ultimate dream for this podcast, once we do take it to video, actually, I would love if this podcast came to a place where every episode we had a different theme of the way we were dressed.
Yeah. Oh my god.
But it would have to be of the time period for the case that we're discussing.
Oh, Jesus. Let me call my costumer. Hey, do you have 1950s, late 1950s clown garb?
You just wait until I get into the medieval I'm going to be like...
Oh, well, that's my wheelhouse. Give me
okay,
a corset
great.
And I'll push those puppies up.
I was like, you got anything from roughly 19? You got anything BC, perhaps?
All
right,
you know,
all right.
I love a theme, a costume. I'd make it work for you.
I do too. I think we need it at some point. We'll have to do it whenever we get together and we film these. But
yes.
All right, let me run you through. I'm just going to run you through a little bit more about the hikers, just so you have some more exposition on like who they were, how the group came to be, and like what led up to the incident. So, one of the hikers I'm going to omit from this story just because he was the one who left the expedition early on January 28th. Let's talk about a lucky break.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll discount him from the group. His name was Yuri Yurdin, and he had left early citing chronic pain with his joints, and it just wouldn't allow him to carry on with the group beyond that initial day that they set off on the expedition. So for the other 9 hikers, the group included 7 men and 2 women, with the leader of the climb being Igor Dyatlov, which is where the name comes from, Dyatlov's Pass. So the majority of the hikers were younger, like I said, mostly in their early 20s, with one of the hikers being 38, and they were all considered highly, highly experienced hikers, very, very proficient in this field. Each of them, like I said, was a grade 2 level hiker with ski tour experience, and having returned from this expedition, they would all have been moved up to grade 3 certifications, which is the highest you could reach. So these aren't kids who were just going on a trip, like any kind of like a camping trip or an expedition. I mean, these were people who knew what they were doing, they were skilled, they were equipped, and beyond that, I'll get into a little bit more of this, but they had actually approved this route. So the group, after being assembled by Igor, it was mostly comprised of his peers and students from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, a lot of grad students. They had received this approval for the trail that was mapped out by the City Route Commission in January. So everything was pretty much cleared for this. It should have gone off seamlessly, but something went very, very wrong up in those mountains. They embark on the climb with their gear the morning of January 27th, 1959. And that morning, all 10 of them, they get up very early and they begin the expedition. By that following day, like I said, Yuri, he is the one who forfeits first, and he has to carry back down the mountain because he can't go on for the remainder of the trek. What just happened? Spirit? Could this be Spirit?
It's Spirit. That was Yuri. Something just dropped on my desk, like something flipped over. I'm so sorry.
That could have been Yuri.
That was Yuri.
Okay. When I'm telling these and I hear like a rogue noise, you spook the
I know.
hell out of
I'm
me.
so sorry. We need to mute me at this point.
I just get like, I'm like, what's going on? Like when that janitor was there last time we recorded.
I'm telling you, and right before we recorded this, just right before, I might as well pour vodka in this drink.
I was like, keep it going,
Oh
keep it
my
going.
God, keep it going. Here we are.
I was like, me and that censor button will become real good friends.
I know. I was right before we hopped on to do the podcast. My door flung open, and I know it's because of the wind, and I had it unlocked. But the door flung open, and then I heard this like doom 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 on one of the doors down the hall, and I was like,
Oh
no,
my god.
no, no, I'm not. Spirit, stay away.
There is something in your building is visually the most haunted in the hallways of anything
Yeah,
I've been in, because I'm used
yeah.
to like these cushy LA buildings where it looks like a dorm basically. So going to a place like DC with like a little bit of history, you're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, there's something here. There's
Well,
someone here.
there's definitely spirit here.
I want to come back and visit you. I miss it.
Yes, please. Oh my gosh.
I have that place written down in my notes, by the way. The bar that we went to, was it called the Green
The
Light?
green zone. The
The Green
green zone.
Zone. Oh
Yes.
my god, those drinks were so good.
I know. Oh my
You know, I
god.
took Jordan and David there. Did I tell you that?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Wait, you did.
Yeah, I took them there because I was like, you guys have to try this place. It's so good.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's like always like top of my list now if people ask me for recommendations, which is rare. Why would anybody ask me?
They'd have to come to DC first and then be like, hey Stu,
Hey
you
Stu.
know a good place to get a to wet your whistle in this
Yeah.
town.
Yeah, that place is amazing.
Oh, so good. I've got
Mm.
fantasies about it. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
where was I? So yes, so Yuri, as we said, he forfeits the trip. He goes back down, leaving the nine to carry on. So we believe that on the 31st of January, remember they departed on the 27th of January. I believe, yeah, the morning of the 27th. The group had gotten partially off course due to some severe weather, which had kind of compromised their visibility. So they had gone up the wrong part of this mountain to the area known as Dead Mountain. But rather than descend the mountain to get to the tree line where they would have had some cover, they could have taken refuge from the harsh weather, they decided to set up camp right there on the slope of the mountain. And this is interesting too, and it's been the subject of a lot of speculation because this was either to avoid losing the altitude that they had gained up until this point, or the leader of the group had just decided that this was a suitable condition on the slope of this mountain because you can camp on the slope of a mountain, even with the incline. This would have been suitable to do so if the weather conditions were so bad that they just didn't have time to descend, and go set up camp somewhere else. The following 24 hours to 48 hours after they set up camp is a bit of a mystery here because we don't exactly know what went down, and the evidence that comes to light doesn't give us much insight. So this is going to shift us into the search portion where all of this is uncovered. But before I jump into that, do you have any questions or want to talk about anything? Feeling good?
Feeling good.
You said I want to know what the hell they found.
Yeah.
Okay. So they set up their camp, and that 24 to 48 hour period, we don't know what goes on. But after the group didn't return when they were supposed to, and there was no telegram that was received to confirm their return, which was set to be the 12th, concerns were kind of peaked, but it wasn't extremely unusual at this time for climbs like this to see delays in returns by a couple of days. So nobody's raising a flag just yet. But by the 20th, concerns become pretty serious that something had gone very wrong up in those mountains. So the hikers' families demand that a rescue team be assembled, and that's what takes place. Those who were set for the first group of volunteers to search for the missing 9 hikers trekked up the mountain, following the same route that was planned and approved by the 26th, and they located the tent, which was described as shocking to the search team. So this is what they found. The tent was found almost completely collapsed, and it had actually been improperly set up, which was really strange because every single one of them was experienced and knowledgeable enough to have set up a tent like this properly and would know how to set up camp. So they thought that was a little odd, that it was very clear that they had done this in a poor way or in an improper way. And as mentioned, it had been cut from the inside out using a knife. The footprints were observed in the snow that were exiting the tent from the cut marks and were headed in all different directions. Like none of them seemed to be consistent or with anyone who was walking together. and many of them were just of bare feet or feet with one sock, maybe like a sock and a shoe. So, which is strange because they had all of their footwear in the tent, but if they're running out there with bare feet, it would indicate that they had to get out there in a rush, right? Like they had to flee that tent. But they weren't. They were walking. They were just walking. Just weird as hell. So there's no other evidence found nearby to indicate that there was ever another group of people who were outside the tent, outside of these nine hikers. Anybody or any animal that had come up to this area, which is just distressing because they have no idea. They said, okay, well, they cut their way out of their tent. We don't really know why. They walked in different directions into the dark. So where are they? So the search continues down the slope towards some of the trees where the first two bodies are found. So these two men were found without shoes and only in their underwear and had both died of hypothermia. But they had also found evidence of a small fire, or the attempt to start a fire, as well as broken tree branches above, indicating that at least one of them had tried to climb that tree for an unknown reason. And what was even more chilling about that is that they had pulled some bark from the tree, and what they found was residue of human flesh on the tree. Like they were trying to violently climb up that tree, and their hands had just scraped down the bark. They were trying to get up there so fast, which is, and they have no idea why. Like what would compel them to climb up a tree like that? There were no footprints or anything around them, no animal prints. It just didn't make any sense. So then they go back towards the tree line and scattered in different directions, different locations. There were three more bodies that were found in poses as if they were attempting to run back towards the campsite, and one of them was found with this severely fractured skull, and the two others they had ruled had died from hypothermia. So then another 2 months would pass before the remaining four bodies were uncovered in a completely different location. And they were buried under 13 feet of snow, much further into the woods and down a ravine by a creek. These bodies were wearing articles of clothing of the hikers who were found previously, but it's believed that all of them had died on the same night. So it's as if the bodies that were found earlier had died first, and then maybe the others took their clothing off them to try to keep warm or like beat the cold, because they all ran out there with almost nothing on. And as mentioned, several of them who were found, the four who were found in this little ravine, had died of blunt force trauma that was determined to be more severe than anything a human could cause. It was described in the report as comparable to someone experiencing a severe car crash.
What?
Right? And okay, and here's what's even stranger about it. So typically with broken bones, like crushed ribs or broken bones along the arms, anything like that, there is some kind of external mark to show like where the body impacted something that broke that bone. They had almost no external injuries. It was just internal. Like it was like they were compressed.
Mm-hmm.
It was so odd. The remaining woman who was found in this group of four was also missing her tongue, eyes, eyelids, uh, and I believe part of her eyebrows and her nose as well, and her chest was crushed as well. All of the bodies they are eventually recovered and examined, where the overall consensus from the examiner is that the event that caused all of this had to have been an unknown natural force that compelled them to scatter into the dark, and the subsequent injuries had happened out in the wilderness somehow, and that's where the case stood at face value. Could you imagine trying to piece that together?
What kind of natural force did he mean? Like,
That's what I'm saying. It's like I think I mean I wouldn't go as far to say like, oh, it's just a cop out response, but I mean it's something that it's just that's the right wording to explain the unexplainable, right? I mean,
yeah.
there's very real evidence here that their bones were crushed, their chests were compressed, but they seem to have no external injuries, and only one of them seemed to have her entire face removed somehow from something.
Yeah. I mean, and they didn't find any like animal kind of like furs or anything in the clothing. Like for some
No,
reason I
no.
was thinking like, did they get attacked by something and it just landed on them? Like it just makes
Yeah,
no
something that like
sense.
stepped on the. Yeah, I'm just trying to think
Yeah.
like what could have actually crushed them, because a lot of people have said, and you'll hear in the theories for this, people are like, well, they fell down the ravine and that's what caused all of the blunt force trauma, but it's not consistent with a fall. I mean, like they didn't have bones that were broken and protruding out of the skin. They didn't have markings on their skin. It was like they were just compressed. That's like the
Yeah.
best way you can describe it. They did. I think the overall consensus is that the woman whose face, her eyes were removed, her tongue was removed. They think it might have been an animal just coming in and eating away. But if so, why her? Why only her? No
Yeah.
one else had that.
That was going to be my next question is if her eyelids and the parts of her that were missing, if they looked like they had been cut off or if they had been like ripped off by an animal.
I read the autopsy report on this. It's shockingly nonspecific,
Yeah.
and it only really details that they were removed, they were absent, and I think initially it might have been suspected that it was just decomp because it had been a while since anyone had
Mm-hmm.
found them. But surprisingly, they were a lot of them were somewhat well preserved, even mummified, because they had been basically frozen for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, frozen just in place in the way that they died. So a lot of them were pretty well intact for examination. And even with that, it was difficult to determine what exactly happened. So I'm going to dip into the actual investigation where we start to look at some of the evidence that they found to see what we can piece together. So, because the attention on the tragedy, of the massive attention on this tragedy, the investigation begins almost immediately. As soon as those first five bodies are recovered, five of the nine, that's when everything starts. And they start to notice the pattern of hypothermia, which they believe that's the whole story, end all be all. We just don't understand why they ran off out of the tent, but they're like definitively ruling, okay, they ran off out of the tent. Maybe they had some sort of paradoxical effect where their logic was impaired. They're pulling off their clothes, they're trying to climb trees, but they eventually did die from hypothermia. It's the remaining four bodies that added this eerie element of confusion to the investigation, because how do we explain that? So, trauma sustained by several of these bodies, considered to be forceful beyond what a person could do to somebody, and they seem to have no external trauma, we don't really know how to make sense. It just doesn't seem to add up. And, they come to some conclusions, like we said, about possibly animals going in after the tongue and the eyes and the eyelids. They're trying to think of ways that they can explain the compression of the bodies and the broken ribs and this blunt force trauma that eventually killed those remaining four. And they're kind of coming up short. But it was determined, I think they were able to determine from the examination of the woman who was missing the eyes, the eyelids, and her tongue and eyebrows, that most likely happened post mortem, which helped support the case that this was
Mm-hmm.
most likely an animal, because I think her actual cause of death was the blunt force trauma. Her chest was crushed as well. And although it was noted as strange that only she had this level of damage to her face and had the soft tissues removed, they've never really explained why. That's not really seen in any other report on this case where they're talking about why she was the only body in that area, even amongst the other four, who had fallen into that ravine, who suffered that kind of trauma and got picked apart by animals. And I can't really understand why.
So the other three, they also suffered trauma. Do you know what kind of like was it mostly head injuries or internal bleeding?
I think there were skull injuries, but I think they all suffered something similar in terms of like a crushed chest, like internal trauma, like a blunt force trauma.
Yeah.
That's what took them all out. But specifically, I'm talking about like her soft tissue, like the tongue, the eyes, and all of that being removed,
Mm-hmm.
why she was the only victim of that,
Yeah.
even though she was found in the same area as, because animals don't, they're not picky when it comes to
Yeah.
looking for food and, scraps.
Yeah. And especially, I imagine if it's a woman and the other three are men, right?
Yes.
That, I mean, I imagine that they probably had more meat on their bones so that an animal would be like
Yeah, I mean,
interested
animals
in.
just don't, even when they're full, they just don't stop. I mean,
Yeah.
if they have access to it, they're going to go for it, or other
Yeah.
animals are going to catch on and they're going to go for it.
Yeah.
It's very, very strange. But again, the final nail in this coffin, to sort of add to the mystery here that I mentioned before, is that the presence of radioactive materials is found around the campsite, as well as the clothing of one or two of the bodies. That has been such a kink in this story for so long. I
That is
think,
so weird.
yeah, I mean, the first thing when I hear that, like, everything's kind of out the window, and I'm like, well, it's aliens. I hate to tell you this, but it's
Yeah.
aliens. But I think there is a logical explanation to some of that. I think one of the men had a job, either a part-time job while he was in school, or maybe he had left school, where he worked in a plant that had radium, I think, or had radioactive materials in it. So it is possible that he brought that with him somehow on his gear, and then it transferred to the clothing. That's the only window in that we have, but I suppose it's possible. I mean, radioactive material doesn't necessarily just dissipate; it just remain. It remains radioactive for like a
Mm-hmm.
very, very, very long time. But that was a strange element to the story that like headlines had gravitated towards because that just seemed completely nonsensical.
Totally. Are there
So
people
yeah,
that believe that like that could have caused any sort of like
cognitive issue.
neuroses or yeah.
No one's really cited that specifically. Um, yeah, no one cited that the radioactive materials could have been the source of any sort of hysteria or anything like that. But there are a few theories about external forces that could have caused hysteria.
Mm-hmm.
Things that I had never even heard of. I had heard about it a while ago when I first heard someone mention this case, but outside of that, I've never heard of these things. But they're kind of they're bucketed into like natural phenomenon.
Mm.
So the investigation hits a wall almost immediately, and they had initially suspected that maybe this could have been foul play in the mountains from the indigenous people, the Mansi people, who were theorized to have murdered the group for being on their land. However, the interrogations of this fall through pretty quickly because their injuries were not consistent, like I said, of anything a human could do, and there were no footprints that were found, no evidence of an attack or a struggle, and there's just no weight to that theory. Um, it just seemed implausible that all of them could have died under such horrific circumstances and that there wasn't some sort of uh, external intervention of some kind or something that compelled them to actually leave the tent. Why did they leave the tent? But that throws a wrench in the investigation, and they eventually rule the deaths as the result of this compelling natural force, and that ends everything right then and there, or at least for the time being. And all that had been left, to review after that were just the items that were left behind in the tent and the state of the bodies. So it was completely nonsensical that they would leave their clothing, their food, all of these resources inside the campsite if they were running. But nothing was ever found to explain why they did that. Like, if you're going to get out and you're going to walk away from the tent, why would you not take clothing? Why would you not take resources? Things to start a fire, food to eat. Why, why leave it all behind in a tent that you just destroyed? The one thing that can give you shelter. And they did more digging inside the items inside the tent. There were no substances that could explain any of the irrational thought, nothing in the journals or the diaries to indicate that something was wrong with the group or there was something wrong with the dynamic. And they even developed pictures of a camera roll that was found to have captured pretty much every step of the journey, which is really interesting. I think there's only about 33 pictures that
Wow.
were taken on that camera roll, but it shows everything up until the point where they are actually digging to like pitch their tent. for this final time, which is chilling. The final frame on that camera roll is something that has been fixated on for this case a lot because it's very different from the rest. It's out of focus, but it seems to be looking up at something that's completely dark, like the night sky. But in the left-hand corner of it, you see like a blurred hue of a light, and no one really knows what that is. If it's a fire, if it's something above them, but it's some kind of a light causing a flare in the camera.
Hmm.
And, of the bodies that were recovered that could have open casket viewings for the funeral, they were described by witnesses at their funerals, and I read these descriptions as very tanned. Like their skin had a slight bronzed orange tint to it, and their hair had turned dull, almost to like a gray, which is very weird because they were all in their 20s, pretty much.
I'm sorry, they had an open casket for these bodies?
Well, you'd be surprised because a lot of them, not many of them, could not have open caskets, particularly the ones that had their face missing.
Oh my
But
god.
a lot of them were pretty well preserved
That's
flesh-wise.
right, that's
Yeah,
right,
because
yeah.
they were frozen. But it was odd because their skin had turned this kind of bronzed color, and their hair had turned gray. Very strange.
They were probably just under so much stress. Oh my gosh.
Might have been. Might have been. It also could have been something that we just don't know about from like decomp. I'm sure there's somebody who will come in the comments and say, no, 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 that's what happens with mummification. You don't know a damn thing. It's just haunting because the families that lost everybody, they never received any sort of explanation here as to what really happened to everyone. The case just remained a mystery all these years later. So, what are your thoughts on what we know and the evidence that turned up?
Hmm. um
Hold on, Mama's got to take a sip.
Oh, I was gonna say take a sip. I'll take a sip of mine. Hmm. The camera roll thing is so interesting.
Right.
Um, I have more questions about um the people that. So were the people that ran up the tree or were trying to climb the tree?
Hmm.
We still think that they were part of the group that cut themselves out of the tent, or they were earlier.
I think that they believed that they were part of it. It was all at the same time. I think, because once that tent was cut open, you couldn't last in the elements much longer without moving
Yeah,
if you were going to go somewhere, because they all had different footprints that were leaving the tent.
that's right.
Whether or not they happened at the exact same time, we don't actually know. But what we do know about those footprints is that it was clear that they were not wearing shoes, and it was clear that they were walking, and that they were all going in different directions in the dark. None of them were together.
So strange.
But
Could
those two of them, they do link up near that tree, and it's like I said, it's clear they were trying to start a fire, they were trying to do something to try to survive. And then they try to climb that damn tree. Why? To see something? To like get above ground or
I thought it was to get above ground, like maybe they thought there was a threat in the area, or like an animal,
Mhm.
or honestly, maybe it's just so cold on ground. You're trying to get out of the snow. I mean, that is so strange to me. That the
It could have just
concept
been
of that.
irrational thinking. If they were cold
Yeah,
enough, maybe they're just not thinking clearly. But
yeah.
I'm kind of siding with you on this idea that they were trying to escape something because you can try to climb a tree, but for them to find evidence that your hands were quite literally like dug
Like
out from,
clawing. Yeah.
yes, clawing to try to climb that tree. Chunks. It was described as chunks of flesh found in the
Ugh.
bark.
Oh my
That's really
gosh.
severe. You're running from something.
Yeah. Um.
But you walked. Like what? But you walked.
Yeah. Well, it's like there was something outside of the tent that they knew they had to escape from, but it's almost like the kind of concept of like getting up in the middle of the night and like leaving somewhere,
Hmm.
um trying to be quiet about it, trying to escape without anyone knowing, like maybe
That's
could explain the running. I mean the
that's so
walking.
interesting. No, no, no. I hadn't thought about that actually. The element of them trying to like keep their cover and keep quiet.
Yeah.
Because it seemed very immediate that they had the immediate need to get out of that tent. They cut it. They left without clothes. They left without shoes. But the walking has always thrown me off. But I never thought about the element of like walking slowly for the sake of trying to keep a low profile. If you
Yeah.
thought something was around, something was watching you.
And what's really interesting is the fact that they did not, whatever this element was, they did not come to the conclusion that they were stronger in numbers. Like they decided to separate. It's very bizarre to me.
So strange. Unless it was accidental. It's possible it could have been accidental in some way.
Because they were in the dark.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, yeah, maybe they intended to leave. I mean, all their footprints had gone in different directions, so maybe they had just like separated initially, but then they had actually lost each other because when I mean, you're up in a mountain like there. I mean, there's nothing. There is no source of light. I don't even think the moon would help guide you.
Yeah. It
To
just is
me, that's
so
very odd.
bizarre.
The injuries I have no explanation for because I can't think of anything that could have compressed a body like that wasn't a fall, unless an animal stepped on them.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I
Ugh.
was wondering if an animal found the bodies later and just walked across it and then started picking and then moved on.
That's the other element of what was really definitive here. We were able to determine the cause of death and what killed them was that blunt force trauma. So if an
Oh,
animal walked on them, they would have had to have been on the ground already for whatever reason. So not dead yet from hypothermia.
yeah.
They weren't dead whenever something crushed them. It was not post mortem.
Oh gosh. Yeah,
But
well, it's
also,
plausible.
what animal is out there that's heavy enough to do that and not leave some kind of claw mark, hair, something to
Yeah,
or footprints?
exactly. So they never found any of that.
No, they never found any of that. I think they had chalked up that maybe the woman whose face was pretty much eaten. It had been some type of bird or something, and maybe that's why they couldn't account for the lack of footprints.
Yeah.
But still, there's something very very off about the consistency of all of them dying from like crushed ribs.
So strange. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking like Avalanche, like something like that, but like that seems
Hmm.
crazy. I mean,
Well, no, I mean that's one of the most highly accepted theories that there was an avalanche, but there's so much evidence to contest it that it's menacing.
oh,
Um, but also, I mean, like I said, the tent was found. All of them were found pretty much above snow,
yeah.
except for the ones that had fallen down into a ravine. But even they weren't beneath deep snow.
It's the cutting of the tent that I can't wrap my mind around.
I mean, there is a movie about this called Dead Mountain, but I think there have also been docs and stuff where they've tried to dramatize and show like a version of like what that night looked like. And the thought of waking up in the middle of the night and someone in your tent is saying, "We have to get out now,"
Yeah.
and they take a knife and your only shelter, they just cut it from top to bottom and they say, "Get out now."
Yeah.
Why? Makes no sense. And then to go so far, why did they feel the need to go a mile away from the tent? Go that far away?
It really seems like they split up and did not intend to stay together.
Do you think there could have been something in the dynamic to explain it? Something that went down in the tent? Something had gone off with someone who was in the tent?
Like possibly, like they were like, I'm over this and I'm getting out and so is coming with me and we're going, and then it's just boom and they left. I mean, could kind of
With
explain it, the walking.
Well, I was thinking more so. I mean, like something goes off with somebody, like someone starts acting irrationally, which could have happened. I mean, if they were just cold in general from hypothermia and
Mhm.
they start acting, scary,
Yeah.
it's the walking that really throws that off for me. But it's also that all of them made the decision to leave without clothes. To me, that indicates that
Yeah.
everyone was either in danger or everyone was off. Like something
Yeah.
was wrong with all of them.
Yeah.
And again, no substances or foods or like anything they could have ingested that would have explained some of that, and nothing that
Yeah.
was ever found in the journals that they wrote to say like something feels off with the group, or like today like Igor was acting strange and I don't know how I feel about that, and like nothing to like tip off or like give us any sort of window into this story. It's like one second they were fine. I mean, there's even pictures of them digging the trench for the tent.
Was Igor one of the four bodies that had been crushed?
No, actually, I think Igor had died of hypothermia because he was one of the. So the two bodies were found by the tree in their
Mm-hmm.
underwear, and then there were three more bodies that were found who were trying to crawl back to the campsite.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah. He was one of those three, I'm pretty sure. The other thing that was strange when they found the campsite was that a lantern, yeah, like a lit lantern was there and was on.
What?
Yes. I know.
Okay.
I
What?
know. I
Outside
know.
of the tent?
I think it was inside.
Inside.
Inside, but it was okay. It could have been inside. I mean, the tent is like I'll show you pictures. The tent was like pretty much fully collapsed, but they found a lit lantern that seemed to be intentionally left there as if like they were leaving the tent but had to leave that there and leave it on so that if they wanted to come back to the tent, they
Yeah.
would be able to find it. To me, it's shocking that it was still on all those days later.
There's a part of me that thinks maybe Igor had directed them to all leave because there was the potential for like a animal or something, and he had a feeling that something was going to go down, and maybe it was like, let's split up, like, and then, once this thing leaves, I'll come find you guys and we'll go back to the tent. Like, it's just kind of, it's so strange to me that everybody's split up into these little tiny groups.
Yeah, yeah. If they were even in group, actually, I think the only people who we'd consider in groups were the first two who
Just
were found by that
okay.
tree. Everyone had gone solo, like in
Okay.
different directions solo, which is even crazier to me. That's the scariest in the world.
Yeah. Oh my god.
I'm gonna run you through some of the theories on this because they're insane, but I am gonna split this up. So, oh my god, I'm just realizing as we did our outro, we never did an intro.
We didn't. Oh, we did it, but we went 3, 2, 1, action.
Well, hey everybody, if you've been listening for the past damn hour, welcome to Creep Time with Silas, Dean, and Stu. We're going to jump into the theories on this in part 2, so if you want to stick around to hear what the thoughts are on what actually happened with Dyatlov Pass, listen to part 2 of this episode.